there have been a number of trips to Los Angeles that were harbingers of more to come. And I think our conversation with you was one of those things. Actually, the comments on the video really helped focus my attention on what needed to happen next.
So just for viewers that did not see your first video with your wife, you guys spoke about transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is called TMS and has been a new development in treatment of depression amongst other things too, right?
Yeah. So when we first talked, I described an approach to using this brain stimulation technique. So transcranial magnetic stimulation is a way to change the brain. I'm a psychiatrist. I am a dual board certified in child, adolescent, and adult psychiatry. So I jokingly say I'm a doctor for kids of all ages. But we worked out over the past 30 odd years that a changing magnetic field can induce an electrical current in the brain. And that electrical current can be patterned, and patterns of firing of neurons, one neuron syncing up with another neuron in some relationship, that's how the brain talks to itself. And so you can learn through a flashcard or through a conversation or through a therapy or through having a wonderful day, or you can learn through having a pattern of pulses of energy induced in your brain. And that's what transcranial magnetic stimulation does. And it can get depression to remission, and it can do it quickly. And remission, like your no signs or symptoms of disease, your depression is over. That was what I saw with that treatment and what we're seeing with more treatments now, even faster and in many cases cheaper.
TMS was not always guaranteed to be effective.
So the first iPhone wasn't as good as the current iPhone.
True.
And the first digital camera was a lot worse than the current digital cameras.
For sure.
And the first version of TMS was nowhere near as good as the versions we have now. And so the technology's gotten better. And technology generally doesn't get better and more expensive. It gets better and cheaper. Maybe there's some high-end thing that's still expensive, but it generally does something better. And what's happened with this approach and others is we've realized you can stimulate the brain and help it change in a way that is remarkably potent and getting more and more inexpensive. And the thing that I saw, we did that first video, we got a lot of comments, and so many of them were about how insurance doesn't cover any of this. And so a lot of what I've been spending my time on is bringing this technology, which we figured out with big, fancy, expensive things like giant brain scans, which are really useful. Like a 3 Tesla MRI is great to have, but it's not on every corner. You can't have that at a pop-up at the airport or something. That would be really hard. You'd take $1 million in structural work just to make sure it doesn't fall through the floor to get an MRI machine in.
Is that right?
Yeah, they have to be helium cooled. Like, it's not trivial.
Wow.
And so the remission rate for someone who couldn't get the treatment is 0. So that's what I've been focusing on, is making it more accessible, both as a clinician, person who builds business entities to make it possible to get it, and as a scientist.
I was so excited about TMS that I had 2 people very close to me try it out. One was a friend who tried it, had instant changes, positive developments with her depression, and then slowly there's a remission of that, or it just kind of faded away. So it was disappointing in the end. The other one was my oldest daughter, who tried it and had no reaction, and then you just said let's be patient, and then we waited 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden things started getting better for her, and that's continued. And that's been a year or more, 2 years.
Yeah, and I was so happy to see it. The thing about brain stimulation as a treatment, we wouldn't expect one pill of Prozac to solve your problems. That having been said, this morning, there was top-line data from a group called Beckley Psytech, which is working on a drug called 5-MeO-DMT, and that's a psychedelic compound. And they actually did a single-dose regimen. And 1 dose of 5-MeO-DMT led to durable remission of depression already out to, I think it's 16 weeks. And similarly with LSD, it's a single dose treatment. Mind Medicine is the company bringing that through clinical trials. But a single dose treatment got anxiety to remission for, I think, 16 weeks in their initial data, 12 weeks. And we're waiting on the 52 weeks. So it may be possible to have something that does that, but TMS isn't one of those things usually.
What are your thoughts on like medications like this?
So we have, at the end of the day, I don't care what helps people heal. I care that they are healed and that they are not harmed. And so there's some ratio that would be great. And the ideal treatment gets someone perfectly well and does not harm them at all and lasts forever, maybe. And there are trade-offs in doing that. And so what we know about transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS, is some people have a really rapid response and some people it takes a little bit longer. And what we're learning is we can deliver the treatment that can get to that response really quickly. And so the current kind of land speed record, as it were, is there's a 1-day treatment that we're administering right now in my office in New York, in Sunnyvale, and a number of other sites with a open label clinical trial, which means everyone gets the active treatment, working with a company called AMPA. And we're combining a drug called D-cycloserine. That's an ancient drug for tuberculosis. It's cheap, it's off patent, it's been around forever. But that drug not only treats tuberculosis, but it helps the brain change faster. It makes the brain more able to change. And so we're doing 20 TMS treatments of only 3 minutes each in 1 day. And it takes a little while to settle in. Most people are getting better, over the course of a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. But at 6 weeks, 70% of people, their depression is over in that first study.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that costs how much?
Right now, it's around just under $5,000.
That's too much.
It is too much. Yeah, it is.
I'm joking. If you're depressed,
well,
I would think anything's worth it.
I mean, the difference is the traditional TMS treatments done over 36 separate days, once a day, you have to come back and forth to wherever the clinic is about $8,000 under most insurance plans. So this is like half of that. And what's even more important is the device itself is 300 grams for the coil that you're holding. Like, it's light. You can put it in your overhead luggage. And the stimulator is, portable, like overhead luggageable. You can put it in the trunk of a Camry. If you have an electric car, you can just plug it in the back. You could do it on the top of a mountain if you wanted to. Wow. The technology has a camera in the coil, and that lets you see the spot on the person's head. And so we can use it either with a brain scan, just using a coordinate system to mark the target precisely if we happen to have it, or we can just use the average target. And I think a 1-day treatment changes a lot. That is work by Jonathan Downer from the University of Toronto. He was a TMS scientist doing treatment in a free clinic, and he thought, I'll get these fancy brain scans and perfect it. But the real problem was the wait list. People couldn't get access to this. And so that's the problem he had to solve for. And so over a series of studies saying, well, can we make the treatment even shorter? Can we get it down to just 3 minutes? Can we get it down to just 1 day? Can we get it down to 1 day plus this drug to make it even more effective? I think we have something, at least with TMS, that is going to be accessible to someone on their day off. And getting someone to be able to take a day off of work is not trivial, but a whole week is hard. And 36 individual days was just never going to be accessible to most people.
Right.
And it's cheaper than doing that. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, now we just got to get every insurance company to pay for it. Hi, friends in insurance companies, please figure it out.
That would change a lot of people's lives.
Yeah.
Are the TMS developments the most exciting thing you're seeing?
No.
What else is going on?
So there are a couple other things that are here now. One of them is called EEG neurofeedback. And essentially they use the same repeatable motion for science. So they took that functional magnetic resonance imaging brain scan, where you're taking a movie of the brain talking to itself. And they did one additional thing, which is they had someone get a functional magnetic resonance imaging scan while they were also getting an EEG. So they're reading their brain waves. And they synced up change in fear and trauma in a brain center called the amygdala. That's the fear center of the brain. And you can look at the change in the amygdala on MRI at the same time as you see what it looks like on this non-invasive EEG. And the computer, using machine learning, can figure it out. Brain waves change on EEG, that equals change in MRI. And then they built a video game and a brain-computer interface that's non-invasive. You just put this cap on, a little bit of gel at this point, and you play a video game with your brain. And when you do that, it treats your post-traumatic stress disorder. And you've heard of MDMA.
Sure.
Right? That was theoretically going to be a big deal. And then they had very troubling allegations about sexual assault of patients in trials. And that is completely unacceptable. But the effect sizes they were promoting as the outcomes before those studies were retracted were 0.93, and that's in units of standard deviations. I'll make it easy. You know Skilo?
I don't.
The rapper?
I don't.
I wish I was a little bit taller. I wish I was a baller. Wish I had a girl if I did, I would call her.
I'm too old.
You're too old for that. You're like 5 years too old for Skilo. I use units of height. So if this drug was a treatment for height, how much taller would it make you? And 1 is 2.5 extra inches. That's a standard deviation in height. And so MDMA was 0.93, and this treatment over 15 sessions is 1.03. So it's better. There's no therapist. It's prescribed by a doctor. You get it in their office, but you don't have to have a shaman handy. You don't have to have an integration session. You don't have to snuggle with anybody. You don't have to any of that. No weight gain, no metabolic effects, none of it. And it can heal your ability to be in the world and enjoy things that you would otherwise enjoy.
It must be very satisfying to know that you're helping people go through their lives without being so depressed.
Yeah. It's also humbling because getting depression over with doesn't mean their life is easy.
No, life is hard. Regardless.
Life is, it's a whole thing. But my hope is for people to have the ability to engage in their life in a way that's meaningful to them. It's still not trivial, right? Once you get not depressed or trauma isn't, a hand on your throat all the time, you now have to figure out how to live kind of all over again. And that is tremendously challenging.
We were talking before we started about TMS patients who had these wonderful changes in their attitude about their lives, their careers, their partners, all that. And some of them, when they have this major change, realize they're just not happy with their lives, careers, partners.
For people with chronic mood disorders, depression, etc., they build a life around fear. And they make choices around what they're going to do with their day that are conservative. Like, what can I still get done when the depression comes back? That's like a driving way to think if you have depression. And when the depression's like gone, and you don't have to build your life around that fear anymore, it really changes the kind of decisions you're going to make. And so there are a number of folks who've gotten a divorce, for example, after getting accelerated transcranial magnetic stimulation treatment. And they might not have been planning on it. So now I actually have that, I include that in the consent process. Like, it's possible you may want to make a huge change in your life, and I don't know what that's going to be.
But those are coming from people who realize, oh my God, my life is, like, I've not really been living my life.
I mean, that's the way we can explain it, and it's probably true. But we don't have a great way to measure that.
No.
So I don't know if that's true, or if it's just like, am I breaking up like happy marriages? But I doubt it. That's not what they tell me, but I don't have a good way of knowing.
Yeah.
When you give people psilocybin and you ask them to like rate whether lizards are conscious afterwards, 40% of people will rate like a sense that lizards have a sense of consciousness above baseline. Like, and that's like, we're not measuring that adverse event in a clinical trial for depression, but like, it seems like something big changed if you think lizards are conscious.
Yes. That's funny.
You know, these are not trivial changes in people's experience and lives. And the way we measure that's going to be important if we want to avoid causing chaos in people's lives that we didn't intend.
Without naming names, are there patients you've seen whose lives have just really been transformed?
Yes.
Can you talk about it?
I mean, I can talk about one because she's unfortunately dead, and her mother sued me, so it's part of the public record.
Oh,
yeah.
I know what you're talking about. This is very interesting. This is like a side topic that affects you.
So the first person who got TMS in my life other than me, I was patient 0. And so I guess, you know, side effects may include becoming a TMS doctor and spending all your time on it. Like, that is a big change. Like, if you want to talk about big changes, I spend a decade of my life on getting this to the world because I had this experience. So we can decide later whether we think that's a good idea.
You had a great experience with TMS.
It cured my depression, and cured is a word I can use as a patient, not as a doctor. But for me at the time, I had no signs or symptoms of depression after the treatment, and I was able to go from residency to fellowship. It happened at the end of residency.
And your depression was pretty severe.
I had chronic recurrent depression along with my bipolar disorder for many years. I spent most of my childhood very depressed. And this not only made the depression go away, but did so in a way that was very different from anything else I'd ever experienced. It was complete. And so that was notable. The first person who was a patient who got treated with this of mine, I wasn't the treating doctor. I didn't have a TMS machine yet. And in fact, the TMS coil in question, they have different geometries of these things. So like one target's here, one target's here. There's a company called BrainSway who makes one of these that's broader and treats obsessive compulsive disorder. And I had a patient come to me. Her name's Mona Hadad, and Mona came to see me after seeing my wife, actually, for about a year. She first met Carlene on an inpatient unit, and when she was hospitalized. And then later, Carlene said when she was discharged, look, if I end up moving to New York and you want me to be your psychiatrist, I will. And that later happened. She actually bumped into Mona in a Duane Reade or something. And Mona said, oh, you said you'd be my doctor. Will you be my doctor? And she's like, well, I did say so. So yeah. And she worked with Mona for about 6 months to a year before I met her. Every other therapist fired Mona because she would call from the rooftops of buildings threatening to jump. And that's a scary experience if you're a therapist. It's also disruptive when it happens 11 times a night or more. She's actually featured in the Atlantic Monthly when she was on that inpatient unit. And she said, under a pseudonym, when you call your therapist and you say, like, my boyfriend broke up with me, they can call you back. When you say you're on the rooftop of a building, they have to drop everything. And it's very disruptive for their lives. And so when I try to find a therapist, no one wants to see me. And when I tell them how many times I've been hospitalized, they're polite, but they don't know anyone they can refer me to. And I don't blame them, because if I end up killing myself, it's going to mess them up. And plus, they're going to get sued. And that's exactly what happened, unfortunately. So she came to see me, and I thought she had obsessive compulsive disorder, which hadn't been diagnosed previously. And she was on the wrong medicine for it at the time. And so I had to get her to a treatment that for someone so suicidal would be helpful, but wouldn't interact with her medicines. And there was nothing that existed except this experimental, at the time, treatment called transcranial magnetic stimulation with this H7 coil, which is made by an Israeli company named BrainSway. And that coil successfully treated her obsession and depression, which now it's FDA cleared. We have a national coverage policy with Cigna. I was just working with my colleagues at another payer yesterday to try to advocate for coverage for this nationally, because treatment-resistant OCD is a devastating illness. And this individual, is in the court record now, was obsessing about suicide. And what we didn't know then, and we do know now, is it doesn't last, like we just talked about. It's not permanent. And this was still literally hadn't been approved by the FDA yet. It was under an open label clinical trial format. And so she got the treatment, and it was remarkably effective. And eventually, she got back to her life. She went on a trip to Israel. She had this full, rich life. And then the treatment started to wear off. And tragically, she was evaluated in an emergency room. She was scheduled to be seen the next day by another doctor for a treatment with intravenous ketamine, and she never made it. And I didn't have TMS, and that device wasn't available to anyone at the time. But that loss of Mona led me to essentially be resolved that I would never be without the tools my patients needed ever again. And here I am. 2.5 years after that happened, her mother filed a wrongful death lawsuit, which was dismissed with prejudice, and then refiled it as a pain and suffering case, which has been languishing in the New York court system since 2019. And I had to file, unfortunately, a defamation lawsuit and restraining order, which still has not been heard in the Kings County court system. But that is a whole process. If you can avoid being in a lawsuit in your life, you should. Don't do it.
Especially the one like yours.
Yeah, well.
I remember when you were first, I guess your name was brought to me about doing an interview.
Yeah.
And I did some research. I looked you up on Google, and sure enough, the first things that came up were all these terrible accusations. And I know from working in social media that people can say anything they want. They can say we're pedophiles and we're members of the Klan and we're
voter fraud is one of my many crimes.
Racist, and they can tell you, they can say whatever they want. Now with AI, they can show that you're whatever you want.
Yeah.
But at the time, I called you up and says, like, there are all these articles saying you're doing all these really terrible things.
Yeah.
I forget what they were, but they were things that no doctor wants to have.
Yes, they're detailed in court filings, and they're. I'm friends with Jeffrey Epstein. I've never met Jeffrey Epstein. There's a picture she photoshopped with me next to Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump, which seemed like a bit much. She accused Elon Musk of deleting her daughter's Twitter profile, which, by the way, he didn't do. It's still up. She just didn't know what it was. And yeah, just every allegation. I'm not the only treater she stalked. She's stalked other treaters who worked with her daughter. She was planning on suing McLean Hospital for years where she was treated.
But with a doctor who's, your reputation is everything.
Yeah, but I also can't say anything about it until it's in a court filing because it's covered under HIPAA. So it's only now that it's public record that I can say this to you. Now that's part of a court filing, I can say something, anything. I couldn't respond to any of her allegations before that because it would have broken the confidentiality laws that bind me as a physician.
It's got to be a terribly stressful thing to go through.
I have post-traumatic stress disorder because of it. So nightmares, trauma responses, hypervigilance, sleep disturbance, those things.
It was the first thing that came up when I Googled your name.
Yep. And that has prevented.
And there were a whole bunch of them. It wasn't just one.
It is she posts close to 100 times an hour on Twitter. She has accounts across all social media. We filed a temporary injunction to stop the damage, and the judge still hasn't heard it. So, it is miserable because it's kept many people from wanting to get help that we have to offer.
I'm sure.
Because they're afraid. And
all you need is one person to read that article or that little entry on Google, and you're just I don't want to see this doctor.
Yeah. And I'm not the only one. It's really, this woman is an outlier in her in her behavior. Like most people don't have it in them. There's data on stalking, by the way. So if you look at stalkers, most of them give up within the first year. It's extremely rare. Less than 10% of stalkers will stalk you for 5 years or more. And so this behavior is rare. The amount of time and energy she puts into it, like literally hundreds of posts in a single hour. I think she's got north of 60,000 posts on Twitter. And many of them are reposting just other things to draw attention. And then she'll just do a binge of these like, he's beaten his children, like stuff. Yeah, it's a bummer. But, you know, she's got a GoFundMe. So, grift.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't get to say what people do with their time. I do know that this is not lawful.
I just love the fact that you've survived that. You endured it.
Yeah.
You've survived, and you're coming out the other side.
So, I mean, the sad thing for me is that Mona was really important as a person and as a patient, and her experience of being rejected by everyone who ever saw her until Carlene, essentially. My wife, you know, was just, she found Mona really compelling and didn't want her to be abandoned. And every other treater gave up. Carlene didn't give up. And then I wasn't gonna, you know, bail on someone who needed the help. But not every cancer gets better. Some people die of their cancer. Not every heart failure goes well. Mm-hmm. Not every surgery is effective or safe, or some people die. And that's true in psychiatry. And ironically, Mona's case taught me about the tremendous gaps in both our empathy and compassion for people who are deeply suffering. I mean, she literally attempted suicide thousands of times in her life.
How old was she?
When she passed, she was 26, I believe. She'd been in the hospital for a decade before she came to see me, not out for more than 2 months at a time. And at least in our care, with the help of brain stimulation, TMS, she was out for a year and a half before she had this relapse. And she had a compulsion to attempt. There's a form of OCD called harm OCD, where you can have a compulsion either to think about suicide and to worry that you might kill yourself, or, even more devastatingly, to attempt suicide. And Mona, I believe, I know she had OCD, and she may have felt a compulsion to attempt. She certainly had thousands of attempts in her life, which could be interpreted as a compulsion. And she had relief from that for a good long time. But you have one compulsive attempt that ends your life, and you don't get another chance. And it really began, you know, ironically, for how much damage this has caused my life and the lives of my patients who, you know, see this stuff online and worry that I'm going to stop practicing or not want to see them too. It's also made me more resolute in wanting to make sure that people get access to care that isn't going to abandon them and is going to keep striving to get better and more effective treatments so they can live a life that's what they want, not what they're compelled to do by an illness.
And if TMS is not effective for a patient, are there other things that you'll pull out of your bag?
So, you know, if TMS is not effective, I think TMS is a modality, right? It's like saying if a phone call isn't effective, don't try another phone call. Well, there are different things you could say. Or if, you know, a car ride wasn't effective to get you to the hospital, like, but which one did you go to and in which city and for what procedure, right? Or, you know, medicine wasn't effective. Which one did you try? Penicillin? Yeah, no, but this is heart failure. So targeting matters for TMS, and so which target we choose matters. And some of that we can refine with fMRI. Some of it we've demonstrated broader stimulation can be better for some people. How able your brain is to change, how plastic it is. And so that's where something like D-cycloserine comes in, and we can accelerate the changeability of the brain. So there are many ways to make just TMS more effective. And there are some really exciting clinical trials going to be published soon on that, but it looks like targeting is wildly more effective than not targeting. And it looks like being able to increase plasticity is more effective than not doing that. And we have multiple clinical trials by colleagues like Dr. Jonathan Downer and others looking at that.
And for those that are wondering, TMS is a very painless project.
It's not painless. It hurts.
It does?
It can.
I mean, I tried it. It didn't hurt.
Yeah, well, it didn't hurt you. But other people find it painful.
You put on something that looks like a little hockey helmet.
Yeah.
And you get these little zaps, but
there's a range.
They're not painful.
It's not, I mean, it's not as painful as depression. And some people it doesn't hurt much at all. Some people it feels like not much of anything. For some people it can really sting in the beginning. Very few people stop doing it because it hurts, right? If you go get a tattoo, that hurts too. Plenty of people get tattoos.
I imagine a tattoo must hurt much worse.
Probably. I don't have any tattoos, so I don't know.
No.
But it's highly variable. Like the experience of pain is variable across people. So it's not painless. EEG neurofeedback, completely painless. There's no sensory experience of it other than it's wet because there's some gel for the EEG. So that doesn't hurt at all. But almost no one says no because it hurts. You're also like done in a day. So like, there are plenty of things that suck that we do for fun, like roller coasters and haunted houses and,
right.
Eating at McDonald's or whatever.
What else is on the horizon? What else is coming?
So the really just mind-bendingly cool stuff, and I mean that almost literally here, is something called transcranial focused ultrasound. So this is still in clinical trials, but it is a neuromodulatory approach where we're using ultrasound just like you'd use to image a pregnancy. Like you want to see your baby's heartbeat, you're using ultrasound. That same technology we use for imaging can be used to change the brain. And it depends, it's not at a higher power per se than imaging. It's just at a different pattern of stimulation. And so there's a company I work with called Sanmai that's doing clinical trials in anxiety. And there are others like Open Water doing clinical trials in depression and a bunch of labs around the world. But the cool thing about transcranial focused ultrasound, or TFUS, is that it can get very deep into the brain. So TMS is basically restricted to the surface of the brain. And you can actually change a lot of the brain by getting to the surface because the brain is connected to itself. It is talking to itself. So there are a lot of like cheat codes you can figure out. Well, if I stimulate here, it'll change something much more deep. With ultrasound, you can actually change and up or down regulate the deep thing. And so it looks like we're able to get results that are similar to deep brain stimulation, or DBS, which is a neurosurgical approach, with this non-invasive approach. The other thing that's true is deep brain stimulation for OCD exists, for movement disorders exists, like essential tremor or dystonia, which is an involuntary contraction of muscles. And you may be wondering, why is a psychiatrist talking about movements? I have come, at least this moment in my brain, to think that essentially these brain circuit disorders, which can cause a movement problem, your feelings are essentially a movement also. It's movement you don't see visually. But I think movement disorders where you have a tremor of your hand and a problem with your emotions may be a movement in your mind also. And so we're using similar targeting for movement disorders that we're using for mood disorders, and we're able to, or obsessive or whatever. And so there's DBS, deep brain stimulation neurosurgery, that goes deep into the brain, implants an electrode, stimulator in your chest, and you can walk around with the stimulation of exactly the right part of your brain, like they're doing at Mount Sinai with Dr. Figge and Dr. Capel, the neurosurgeon, to relieve symptoms of OCD all day, every day, so you don't have to keep going back. And for some people, that makes a lot of sense. For essential tremor, can't hold something still, you can implant an electrode in the brain. In the operating room, you turn it on, and the tremor's over. It's already FDA approved in Parkinson's. The OCD and essential tremor indications have humanitarian device exemption, so you can implant it without it being in a study and get it paid for by insurance if you're lucky. But that's we put pacemakers in people's hearts all the time. We know your heart needs to work or you'll die. We seem to have more reticence to make your brain work, but it's the same, basically, procedure, just a different part of the body.
Where can people go to get these treatments?
So Meet Radial is MEETRADIAL.com. That's my company. And it has locations now in South Carolina and Myrtle Beach and New York and more other places soon. Coming to San Diego probably by the time this video's out.
That's great.
Yeah. And more after that. Acacia Clinics in Sunnyvale, California offers many of these treatments and some of the clinical trials for them if they're not approved yet. And we hope many, many, many more places in the future because maybe even your home, right? If this can fit in the trunk of a Camry,
right,
like that AMPA device, well, it probably should go there, right? And someone should bring it to you so you don't have to schlep in, especially if you live in some far-flung place like
it's a very exciting.
Malibu.
It's a very exciting time to have mental issues.
Well, I mean, I don't know that anything's super exciting in America when you have a mental health problem because we're not like, but I think in 3 to 5 years, it's better than it's ever been. And if you're lucky enough to see this video and access this treatment, and by the way, thank you. A number of people who saw the last video came and got care with us and did really, really well. So life-changingly well, actually.
Yeah, seeing that first patient, Gwendolyn, who I interviewed probably almost a year before I met you, I was so impressed with this young lady. She was just so cheery and full of life and positive, and she described her life before TMS, and she was just so depressed and dark.
Yeah.
That's all I had to see, and that's why I encouraged my daughter to go do it. That's why I wanted to do the interview with you.
Yeah.
That's why you're back again.
That's why I'm back again. I want it to be accessible, but also insurance has to pay, and all of us have a role there. I'm going to briefly do my little call to action for everyone in the audience.
Please.
Hey, if you have insurance coverage, you get to use it. And briefly, health insurance in America is not in the business of saving money. They're in the business of making a lot of money, like an interplanetary scale of money. So there are 3 major insurance companies that own the big pharmacy benefit managers. And just to give you a sense, pharmacy benefit managers, which don't make drugs, they don't sell drugs, they just move rebates around, which are legal payments that we would call in any other context a kickback. But last year, that industry of moving rebate money around between pharmaceutical company, insurance company, vertically integrated pharmacy, pharmacy benefit manager who negotiates the deal, which are often, other than the pharma company, all the same company, right? So it's literally like the pharmacy benefit manager is the same company as the insurance company, is the same company as the pharmacy. And so like the insurance company is negotiating a price with itself. And then they're negotiating a rebate between itself and the pharma company to list it at a higher tier on their own formulary so they can sell it to you for the average cost, and this is true. Last year, the average cost is, what is it? It's just under $300,000 a year for a new drug. It's like I take a drug for my arthritis called Skyrizi that's around $20,000 a dose. A single dose. And you have to take that forever. And that's every 12 weeks, right? There are drugs that are $250,000 or more for one drug a year. So the scale of money moving around healthcare is unimaginable. And that is the equivalent of $1 a meter from here to Saturn. It's the equivalent of the entire money in 2023 dollars for the Challenger program, plus the entire Apollo space program, plus 10 Hubble space telescopes, and that still only gets you to 2012 pharmacy benefit manager numbers, and that's 3 companies. It's United Health Group with Optum, it's CVS Caremark, and it's Cigna with its Express Scripts subsidiary. So overwhelmingly, the money in healthcare is not about saving money. It's about making it cost more, and they get to keep a percentage of how much more it costs. And so the jam is just to negotiate with yourself around the ever-increasing cost of healthcare. And I know that sounds bleak and that people are making a lot of money who are not you in the audience, and you're right. It's a scam. If it sounds like a scam, that's because it's a scam. It just happens to be legal. So what can you do to get access to these things? In 2021, there was a law passed, and it got through in the Consolidated Appropriations Act, which is how the big budget for the entire year gets passed in Congress, and they included a little extra language that says that your employer has a fiduciary duty to you to make sure your health benefits are in your interest. They can't legally sell you scam health benefits. And here's the magic. The people on the line for that are the named fiduciaries of the company, which means your CEO, CFO, and pension committee at any big company. Those people are all personally liable for your health benefits not being in your interest. Wait, what? So they're in a really bad position. I would not want to be a CEO of a big company right now because the lawsuits have already started. And I don't think you have to sue your company. I think you can inform your company that the health plan they purchased needs to cover this. Because if it doesn't, someone who's not you could sue them and cause a lot of trouble. Right? This is how we got rid of piracy in America. Right? Video game piracy or software piracy was all like, especially enterprise software. Report your job for piracy. It's a $400,000 penalty. And no one pirated anything ever again because angry employees took action. And the same thing is happening in health benefits. There are already lawsuits filed against Johnson & Johnson, against Mayo Clinic, against all these other huge employers to enforce this stuff. And so I would say, help your company not get sued by pointing out the fact that their plan should cover this TMS treatment. And if it doesn't, because by the way, there are randomized controlled trials demonstrating its cost effectiveness, so there's literally no excuse not to cover it for you. Feel free to make that case. Send an email to HR. I need to get this covered. Make the ask. Put it in writing. And do so, if you're afraid your job's going to fire you. Well, look, I just want to make sure we're covered. Let's check with our health plan and make sure they're not pulling one over on us.
Has medicine always been so corrupt?
No.
Hasn't. It's fairly new.
It has accelerated dramatically since the Accountable Care Act. And there's a whole history to this, but in taking the medical loss ratio, that fixed percentage of profits that insurance companies were able to make, that changed everything. Because if you can make 20% of the money, well, how much total money should you make? More. How much ice cream would you like? You can only have 20%. I have 9-year-olds. Oh, how big can the bowl be? No limit. I'll have another scoop. And if you're a publicly traded company, the share price has to keep going up. So what has to happen to the total cost of healthcare? It has to go up for you to make 20% of more. And the easiest way to do that was to also be on the other side of the table. So that company I mentioned before, United Health Group, which has had some difficulties recently. Hi, guys. It just lost half of its share price in the past month. Well, it is employing 10% of all American physicians. It used to be worth $500 billion. Now it's worth $250 billion. And it made $9 billion in profits last quarter. And it does that by being the insurance company and being the pharmacy and being the pharmacy benefit manager and being the analytics company and being the literal bank that pays all the doctors and employing all the doctors and doing the prior authorizations on its own doctors and being the imaging services provider and God knows what else. I mean, it's literally 16 pages of companies that are all United Health Group. It is unimaginably vast. I think if you had the entire executive team's family on above a Shark Tank, and you said just all you have to do to have them live is tell us what your company does, everyone would be dead because no one could possibly know. It's that big. But they negotiated with themselves so aggressively that the costs went up and people used their healthcare a little bit more last quarter, and oh my gosh, they paid out too much. So these businesses are just so large and so impossible to manage, and the expectations are for endless growth. And it's 7% per year compounded annually. That's all the money pretty quickly.
It makes it harder for doctors just to do the right thing.
It makes it impossible for doctors to do the right thing. Yeah. And that is the reason that these treatments are hard to get to people. And that's got to stop. And all of us can say something to our elected representatives on our social media feeds, to our friends and families, in a letter to their employer's HR department. And the more we all say, the more they can get the hint that this is a problem for them. I'm fundamentally of the opinion that people don't change in big organizations for the better. They try to stay out of trouble. And I'm not saying you make trouble. I'm saying you point out that you don't want them to get in any trouble. And one of the ways of doing that is complying with all rules and regulations. So we'll see.
All right.
But I do think it's important to understand a little bit of the massive scam behind what we've all decided to make legal over many, many years for very complicated reasons. But it's not serving us anymore. It's not a system you design ever. It's a system that stumbled into being. And then people, frankly, of goodwill. I'm not saying people who work at these companies are bad. I'm saying they're working in an impossible system with incentives that are terrible. But if you want to get this care for you or your family, you should go get it. And you should write a letter saying, I deserve it. And then you should let them fight it out.
I think the public is getting hip to it.
Yeah. But taking effective action, writing that letter,
That's
the next step.
Yeah, that's going to take some
Write the
work.
letter to your job, write the letter to your congressperson, let them know it's got to stop.
All right. Owen Muir, thank you so much for enlightening us, giving us a little update.
Thank you.
And we'll do more in the future.
Happy to be here.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When I was designing the first Soft-White Underbelly book, I realized that there were so many great portraits that weren't going to make it into that book. They just wouldn't fit. And once I saw how well that first book sold, I knew I'd have to design a second book. This second book is finally ready to ship. Like the first one, this book has a collection of some of the best portraits from Soft-White Underbelly, accompanied by a quote from that person's interview. This book features another group of Rebecca portraits, as well as a collection of color images of the Whitaker family, and plenty of others. You can order yours for $125 or $150 for a signed copy at softwhiteunderbelly.org. Again, like the first book, once this book is sold out, I will not be printing more of them. The portraits are what Soft-White Underbelly is all about, and these two books contain the best of all that work. Thank you for watching.